Before we go further and talk about the dope sheet, we need to talk a bit about Blender's data. If you're beginning with Blender, the most common data you are manipulating is the material of an object. You may have watched tutorial where you create a material and then you share it on multiple objects. For example, we can see this blue material applied to the Suzanne head. If I select the cube, I can go into the library and apply to it the blue material too. Both objects are now sharing the same material or sharing the same material data. With my cube selected, if I apply again the blue material, I will see a number 2 appearing next to the material name. This number indicates how many objects or users are currently using this blue material. And it's currently 2, the monkey head and the cube. It means that if I change the color of this material, it will be changing on both objects because it's the same data that they are sharing. So as explained in the very first video of this chapter, objects are just containers, and if I go to the mesh data, I will also find a data library that will allow me to source any other mesh data from any other object. With the cube selected, if I select the sphere mesh data, my cube will be transformed into a sphere. And Blender indicates us that there are 2 objects using those mesh data. We have also seen that the object has changed color because the material is bound to the vertices. By loading new mesh data, we have also sourced the material data linked to it. If we now go back to our bouncing ball animation, with the graph editor open, I can see that I'm working on the ball, but just under we have this sphere action.002 that we haven't talked about. And when we look at our graph editor hierarchy, we can see our mesh object, the ball. This sphere action.002 is bound to the ball, and all the transform channel keyframes are bound to this sphere action. Instead of the graph editor, let's open the dope sheet. Let's consider the dope sheet as being like the timeline. All the shortcuts and filters we have seen with the timeline works within the dope sheet. We can see our mesh object and the action in the hierarchy. If I now enable the collection cone and I start animating the location of the cone by inserting a couple of keyframes, a new hierarchy appears in the dope sheet. We can find our cone object with a new action called cone action. As soon as you insert a keyframe on an object that hasn't been animated yet, it will automatically create a new action. These actions are the name of the container that contain the animation data. And the dope sheet is an overview of all the animation data that are being used in our scene. Here we can see which container is using the animation data and what action is being used. But now, what if I want to edit those animation data? We can access them through the action editor. With the action editor, we will be able to work on a specific action at a time. With the cone selected, I can see that I'm working on the cone action. And as for any other kind of data, if I click the action icon, I will access our action library. So it means that as for material or any kind of data, I can share this animation to any other object. So I will select my sphere action 2, rename it bouncing ball, and when I play the animation, I can see that now my cone is moving as our bouncing ball. And near the action name, I can see that I have 2 users of the bouncing ball animation. So I can share this animation on as many objects as I want. I can give it to Suzanne here, and now we can see that we have 3 users, and when I play the animation, our Suzanne monkey head will move as the bouncing ball too. Since I've given the bouncing ball animation to all my objects, the cone action, for example, has no more users. And if I browse my action library, I will see this little 0 in front of the cone action. And you have to be very careful with that, because whenever you have any kind of data that has a 0 in front of its name, Blender will get rid of this data as soon as you close the software. So if I revert my scene or reopen it, if you will, the cone action data marked with the 0 has disappeared and I've lost this animation. To avoid losing an animation, you can click the little shield icon that will create a new fake user. Whether the data is used or not, Blender won't flush it on restart. As we have seen before with the materials, as soon as a data or an action is shared, editing it on one of the objects will affect any other container that is using the same action. If you want to duplicate the current action, you can click the number next to its name. This becomes a new action or a new data that you can edit freely, and you can see that there is no more multiple users on this one. And this new duplicated action has been added to the action library. To definitely get rid of an action, shift-click the crossed icon. When reverting the file or reloading Blender, the animation data or the action will be removed. If you're starting fresh and your object is not animated, you can press the new button to create a new action. I will insert a couple of keyframes to illustrate one thing. When you get this orange continuous line between two frames, it means that the value is not changing. As soon as I enter a value on one of the transform channel, we can see that now there is no more this orange line on the Z location channel. Switching to constant or linear interpolation will create a green line between the different keyframes. So it basically tells you that you are not using Bezier interpolation. Changing the handle type of your keyframe will be also displayed in the action editor. You will see the shape of the key currently changing. The action editor will become our main editor when it comes to animation before we jump into the graph editor. To summarize, we have seen that the dope sheet shows us all the current actions that are being used in our Blender scene, while the action editor allows us to edit one action at a time. Action is the name of the container for our motion or animation data, and as any other data, an action can be shared by different objects.